Hello, this is Chris Goldthorpe with ChrisChess.com. This video is going to be for approximately like 12 to 1400 level players who haven't really settled on an opening repertoire. Maybe they're in the process of adjusting their repertoire and have always been an E4 player, as is appropriate for a lot of new players. So this one is going to focus on the Giucco Pianissimo, which means the very quiet game. So, if you have any experience with the regular Giucco piano, you may know that it can be quite tactical and complicated. For instance, with the D4 lines, when you have this, he's going to need to capture. Now, you've got the Max Lang variation here, which is full of tactics and very fruitful for a tactical player. So it's well worth consideration for a student whose tactics are not bad for their rating. C takes D4 is perfectly good as well. This check is superior to anything else black can play there, to the point where we could say if black does something else, he's made a serious mistake. This is objectively probably best, bishop D2, but knight C3 can be very interesting. Of course, there's the Steinitz game where black played this old variation, and although that's not really a bad move, he made a bad move later and got rolled up. But knight takes is possible. Now white is down a pawn, and he has sacrificed, gambited the pawn. Of course, now he threatens to take the knight. It's very tricky here because people who haven't seen this before, they might think that they could take with the knight, which actually you can, as long as you don't take this pawn with your bishop next. The move for black here would be to play D5. Usually a player sophisticated enough to know that will not play knight takes knight, that will play a more common line, this, and a common mistake for white would be to simply take back, where black would of course be making a mistake to give his knight away like this, check, but he doesn't have to make that last blunderous move. He is a pawn up, and he could simply go here, and black is better. So white needs to do something a little more dynamic than just take the bishop there. He pushes here. This is called the Molar Variation, and to be honest, you're not going to see real strong players playing this. I had a game where black did this, and the whole game, I hesitate to show it because it comes straight out of a book. The whole game is exactly like a game I saw in Max Erver's Judgment and Planning in Chess. The whole game followed every move of this. I don't know if maybe he just wanted to lose some rating points. Actually, the best move here is, according to computers, is Queen E2. However, I played this move, takes, I went here, and for some reason the computers think you'd have to just give one of these knights away. My opponent tried this. I took this pawn. He went here with his queen, so I traded to give check. He went this way. I check him. He goes here. Now the rook comes up with threatening a checkmate here. Black did this, so he's now got one knight guarding this mate and one knight guarding against this mate with the rook. But when I went here, he resigned, because if he moves his pawn up, it does no good. I take his knight. He can't take the rook because if he does, I'll checkmate him. Although that knight variation, knight to e5, is actually playable for black. I've done a lot of research on this. But like I said, actually queen e2 was a better move than taking the bishop, which I did not know during the game. I was just following a game I had seen in a book where white won, and didn't see any reason to vary from what had been successful before, but the computers say queen e2 is a little stronger. So, going back from here, the more common, regarded as safer move for black is to go bishop e7. And again, taking the knight is tempting, understandable, as black is down a piece and wants to get it back. However, he really should just take back this way. And now if white goes here, it's only an empty threat after black castles, because this doesn't result in winning material. And black's center is not bad, and black has both bishops just like white. So no, taking the knight with the pawn is not the best way for white to take advantage of this pawn's position, but rather he continues to accelerate his development in a manner consistent with the spirit of a gambit. Now he threatens both knights. Black moves the only knight that can move, thus undoing the pin on the e4 knight. So now he can move this knight where he wants, but white moves it first off the board. Black should not let white get this move in, even if it were to give away a pawn like it might later on. Right now it's guarded by the white queen. White's idea there is to open this diagonal and to imprison black's queenside pieces. So black goes here now, which lets the bishop out and stops that move and keeps this bishop blocked off. White comes out here, where he's threatening to trade bishops and mess up these pawns. So he takes, and then white takes, and a long time ago black would just castle, and then they would have a draw because white would take this, takes back, and white ends up with a very dangerous looking attack that almost works, and in the end he's compelled to create a perpetual check. So he creates a threefold repetition because he's down too much material and can't quite get it all back. So it's not really necessary for us to see this line, as it is now obsolete. That happened at move 13. Actually, Lajos Portish, the Hungarian-born grandmaster, found this move, 1963. I found that out after a game where I thought this move was my own invention. Turned out that it's actually a good move. When black takes, white takes, and then Portish played bishop e6. The whole point is since he's got to give a piece back anyway, why not do it in a way that closes off this dangerous file? And then goes here. I suppose the reason no one ever gave it much thought before is because black's position, though actually very strong, looks very precarious with all these weakened white squares over here. I have two games in my ICC history, one where I won and one where I lost in this game. In both games, the white pieces won. Those might be worth a real quick look. Let's have a quick look at those. And now the win is against a USCF rated master in a long time control USCF tournament. So let's go get that. And we'll get this game here. Examine. And like I said, my opponent here was rated over 2200, and this was a USCF rated slow tournament game, 40-2 time control.
Check.
And really, bishop to d2 is better for white. Takes. And so far everything's normal. And now he does this move. So I did this. He takes. I go here, and he castled. So I take his knight. He's preparing to guard e8 enough to put a rook here and maybe just trade off the stuff on the e file and take advantage of my weakened pawn structure. So let's see, what are we really threatening here? Pretty much just the pawn at g5, or to play bishop d3. And so I take the pawn, and he goes back here with his bishop. So I get the rook lift in. Now my rook's ready to come join into the attack, while his rook is not. Okay, now queen to the h file is going to be a problem for him. So he comes back over here. Well, I don't mind now because I have access to h8. I'm threatening the mate. He resigned here. Okay, now I'm going to show you the game where I lost. Same opening though. Leon Sellard. And he was a lower rated player when he beat me here. But I'm going to go up just to the point where white is in trouble, because that's all we really need to know. Yank this all the way back to the beginning, and same start. And it's not really necessary to memorize these moves unless you're going to start playing the regular d4 Giucco Piano. I'm giving you this as background for a positional understanding of where this opening stands against these similar choices that are possible. So we see the same start, and I make this move, and then I go here. So I'm convinced at this part, oh yeah, black is going to do well, and should have, only it was a mistake later on, which you can see it's easy to make a mistake if I'm studying this opening specifically. Yeah, that I learned is the mistake. Now this bishop is aiming for here. The knight guards it for now. Now that weakens e5. This move threatens rook takes rook, which I think you can see that's a big problem. So black does it. Now that normally happens. Now white is actually threatening to move his queen here. And that seems to stop it for now. The problem is the queen has this square, which it's not supposed to have. So this is where I think black has gone wrong, and it's starting to go south. Now white's threatening the mate here, and white just keeps the attack going wisely on his part. He should not trade queens. And there we go. So black never gets his rook out. Okay, enough of that. When you're on your third move, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, in other words, when you get to this position, and you say, gee, what move should I make? Um, bishop c4 even comes up as a top move by some engines. If we just look at, the stats like we did a moment ago, we see that the Ruy Lopez is the overwhelming favorite and the highest scoring opening. But let's not forget, these statistics are compiled exclusively from the games of players who are very much non-representative of the rank and file of chess players, especially kid chess players, because almost everybody in the database is over 2200, which represents the top fraction of 1% of all the players. Among such players, the Ruy Lopez probably does do better, but against kids, bishop c4 I've seen for myself. Close up and personal, it works very well. So let's have a look at the main lines here. So let's suppose you're trying to play your Giucco Pianissimo and black plays the two knights defense. If you're trying to get to that position, I mean, knight g5 is still a very good move. And playing bishop c4 instead of playing the Ruy Lopez allows this to be a possibility. So you may want to do it anyway. The only thing is that fried liver attack is really very dicey for both players. So maybe if you're playing a higher rated player who doesn't know that position, that would be hard to guess at. When kids play in scholastic chess, normally they don't know their opponent at all. And it's a fair bet that their kid opponent has been exposed to this opening, as it is so popular among kids in the US. So d3 would be a way to attempt to just play into the Giucco Pianissimo, where black can just play bishop c5, which is a good move for him, but then white goes c3. And he may even play b4, b4, a4, a5 coming in the future, who knows. Every once in a while this bishop will go to b2. But this position now does take on a very Ruy Lopez-like character, as the queen's knight typically should get to either g3 or e3, and even eventually to f5 via d2, like this. It's a more positional sort of system. So we're going to go back to where black plays the normal Giucco Piano move order, and going from there, I like this move. There's nothing really wrong with playing d3, but if you play this first, it gives you the option to play d4. Now your opponent does not know that you're not going to play d4, but he has to worry about it anyway here. Knight f6 is the usual move. And then if you just play d3, white has no real weaknesses. However, he's not really ahead on development either. He's made 5 moves and gotten 2 pieces off the back row. And now after black's next move, he'll also have made 5, but he's got 3 minor pieces out. So, going forward from there, you know what? Let's just get where we kept this and go to this. Okay, so now if you're trying to play that opening in general in a tournament between masters, there's a lot of different moves here. In fact, you'll see that the Sicilian here is played more often than e5, and the French and the Caro-Kann and the Pyrrhic all get their moves. But in scholastic chess between kids, almost all games start like this, this, and this. Okay, so this is our first chance to kind of look at the stats here. So, and again, I say these stats do not represent kids and so forth, so we're going to look at some others in a minute, and I'll explain why. They're different. Here we have the straight situation of the first two moves on both sides have been made. It's white to move. And among those games of really strong players here, out of 37,000 games, 27,000 plus are Rui, and only 5,000 are Bishop C4. And the Rui scores almost 56%, where Bishop C4 scores only 52%. But again, this is in Grandmaster versus, or at least titled player versus titled player chess. So it's not really representative of how things would go among kids or lower rated players, or even adult amateurs who are under expert level for that matter. But since out of all the wins in this database, 75% of them from this position come from the Ruy Lopez, and the 25% is spread out among Bishop C4, D4, the Scotch, and Knight C3, 4 knights game. So of those 4, only Knight C3 is really kind of lame. I might have a beginner who's like a 400 rated player play the 4 knights game for a little while just to make sure they know how to develop their knights. Okay, Evans Gambit. This list I think is a little more relevant because this is an aggregate list of the statistics from ICC where players at all different levels, including strong and weaker and intermediate players, play. It's probably still a little bit higher of a skill level in general than what we see in scholastic chess. However, look at the Evans Gambit, which straight out wins are almost 50%, and then another 12% are draws. Black only gets about 38.5%. When we compare that with the Giucco Piano, which only gets like 44%, and the Ruy Lopez also, the Evans Gambit, among weaker players, the Evans Gambit is absolutely the king here. Absolutely king. Despite that the popularity among real strong players is like this, with Bishop B5 comprising almost everything. This is the Bishop C4 move here. Among all the wins, that's what we have. So I understand why people would say, well, if I'm going to play the Giucco Pianissimo, why don't I just go ahead and play the Ruy Lopez? And well, that you might. As a matter of fact, I think it's well worth having a good look at the Ruy Lopez, even if you intend to not play it and play the Giucco Piano instead, just because there's so much middle game and pawn structure similarity. So if you're going to play the Giucco Pianissimo, I say look at the regular Giucco Piano. Decide what you're going to do with the 2 knights defense. Are you going to just play D3 and try to get into the Giucco Pianissimo? Or are you going to play the Knight G5, that more aggressive but more risky line? You have to decide ahead of time. If you have a trainer, only your trainer should be involved with these opening decisions, or somebody who knows your chess real well. So, having talked about that already, let's take a look at the actual lines in the Giucco Pianissimo, starting with the main line. And go here. Castled. Black plays A6, which is actually a place for his bishop to get away when white advances his pawns. This is to get away from the knight. Without that move, black will often, when his e5 pawn is very secure, as it is here, move over here to get the bishop. Now with this pawn at c3, we have this fork to worry about. But still, white often is very adamant about preserving this bishop, as if you're the white pieces, maybe you want to be too. So that's the purpose of going here. Now if the knight comes to a5, he can just tuck it back in here and have it ultimately aimed at the king side. He gets that out of the way. Now when white plays d4, it will not be threatening the bishop, so that'll give black a little more options. He might even go for like queen e7, similar to the center holding variation. Now when the e-pawn takes, he'll have even more pressure on black's e-pawn. And this prevents the bishop from pinning the knight so that he can more easily eventually play d4. And black would love to get white to trade his bishop off. He just doesn't want to spend an extra move on it yet. And almost all of these moves, as you're about to see, get put in every different move order. So they keep reaching a similar position though. Let's say here, instead of playing d6, let's suppose he plays a6. He's going to end up playing d6 though shortly. See, there we go, and it's right back to the same position. All the same moves made, just in a slightly different order, and we arrive at exactly the same position. Let's suppose he castles. He castles. Now that the bishop is free, he guards his other knight. Makes a place for his bishop to get away, so does white. He gets back. He prevents the pin, so does black. He prepares to lay siege to the black e5 pawn. And now the knight relocates. White doesn't want to trade light-squared bishops. And there's the capture again. Same position. Exact same position. If we look at this and this, not one piece moved, right? If we go down to here, that may be different. If he plays bishop to b6 right away, there's this b4 move, which prevents knight a5. That's to give the bishop a way to get away, and white immediately starts working at getting his rook on the e-file. Here, black will sometimes try to bring his knight to f4. And if black's got to take back with the rook, that's a bit awkward for him. Here's another line that black can play, stopping the pin of his f6 knight right away. But we still end up seeing the same moves. So this position is one you should take a picture of and put on your chessboard and play against yourself over and over and over. Then analyze it deeply with the computer. Then go back and play it against yourself again. And then you might play it against yourself with the computer. Get to the point where you are very familiar with this position as it may come up again. All right, there's the castles, a6. Let's see, what could he have done? Again, here he could have castled. But it seems that all roads do lead to the same place. And again, we get to this same position. If black goes here, almost all the best moves end up going to the same position. And then goes here again. So it's a good position to get familiar with. Let's see, bishop b6. See, he's not real anxious to grab the bishop because this knight is part of his plan to go here and maybe even to go to f5 or d5, but usually f5 with that knight. That's the d4 pawn's defender there. After he's threatening the rook, so black will take it back, and then white will take this pawn, and black may take this e-pawn. So let's take a look at some games from this opening. Here's Alexander Morozovich versus Michael Adams. They're both over 2,700. This is ECO C54. This was played in 2008. You often have to go back a few years to find a slightly offbeat opening. If you were looking for Rui Lopez, you could probably find one from this week. And bishop c4, bishop c5, c3, knight f6, d3, and he elected to play a6. So if he moves his bishop back here, then by putting his knight here, he will certainly be able to trade a knight for the bishop, or a pawn for the bishop. So white's going to avoid that now. He gets that out of the way. See, getting that out of the way is involved with his pawn going here for a fork. But when the bishop is at b3, of course, there's no such fork. This prevents this bishop from going here. Obviously, it's not urgent yet because black's d-pawn didn't even move yet. He does the same thing where white's bishop is ready to go here. And the knight begins to come out. And he gets his other bishop out. Now this guy's going to relocate to E or G3. Bishop E6 as before. And he comes up here. He could get ready to do this. Sometimes they go here, but when they go here, there's a little tactic. If the knight's not guarded here, see the queen and this knight, he could go here. Castles. Knight H2. D5, Queen F3, Knight A5. Now these games that are included here as supplemental games are worth going over, and they are worth trying to find out why whoever lost did lose. And white is keeping his bishop pair. In every variation of the Sicilian that I am aware of, black almost always tries to get a knight to c4. He could have tried this move also, whereupon white might do this, like he'd like to do something like that, or go here and force him to move these. Knight c4 again, threatening mate, so that could make him trade, but now black's e-pawn is mobile. He undoes the pin on the g file, so bishop takes h6 is not a threat anymore. White castles, and that queen is also lined up with g7 and d5. White puts some more pressure on it. Black does as well. White does as well. Black has that pawn 3 times guarded, but his last move didn't add anything to the equation. And the rook comes up. Looks like he might be looking to play b3, followed by moving this bishop here and then getting his rooks lined up. He takes the pawn, and then he attacks the queen. The queen's got to move out of the way. He puts pressure on the knight, but the knight's guarded by the queen. It takes, sacrificing itself for a mere pawn, and then black goes here. Could that be worth it? He saves his rook. Another attack on the queen. He lines up with G7 and C7 for that matter. Okay, white does have a bolt hole, an escape square, a luft in the event of an attempted back rank mate. And white does eventually double his rooks on the e-file. I think black did that so that he could put his bishop here and get control of this diagonal. White prepares to possibly to put his bishop in the way. And black now attacks c3, but white has it guarded. He puts his bishop here. Now bishop b8 is out of the question. That would be black moving here. And what did they agree to here? What do you think? All right, knight g4, castles. This is back to the game. Knight f5. And now white is going to use pawns as a battering ram against the king, which should almost always happen in the in this opening. It always happens in the Rui. Okay, black's preparing to get his pieces closer to his king, but this, even though it gives away a pawn, it's going to wreck white's king side. He does this trade. Queen takes back. Takes. Oh, pawn takes. So he would go here, which threatens what? G3 would trap the black queen. This little old pawn move here. Just going here, the black queen would have nowhere to go. Notice these bishops over here. Oh yeah, he could go to c4. f5. Queen gets away for now. Now h6 is double attacked. Maybe it's going to be triple attacked. Oops. Because rook g1 is always possible back here on this square. Takes. And what happens? We got to know. What happens if he takes that? White could try this. But this is winning for white. So that's why he didn't do that. He went here. Attack and check again. I would guess rook takes e5, but he didn't do it. The e-pawn is still pinned. Attacking the queen. Queen moves. Guarding f2, threatening to get black's rook from a8 to a7, where we'll be sort of out of the mix for a minute. Doubles up on the h-pawn, which white does have double defended for now. Creates the battery. He makes the trade. And now the queen comes in, but still f7 and g8 are well defended. Oh, until now. So, rook g8, queen g8. And on king e7, queen g7. Knight f7. The knight can't move because of queen f7. What happens on rook f3? Oh, that's what he played. He took with check. So he just takes back. Ah. Check answered by just moving the king. No more checks. And so white wins. His king is in big trouble. All right, let's look at the next game. Dominguez Mamedurov. And I'm going to pretty much just go through the game itself. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, so a movie picture is worth 1,000,000. White castles, rook e1. Gets the bishop out of attacking range. White does likewise. And black releases another minor piece. He prevents the pin. So does black. He gets his other knight out. Bishop e6. Here, for a move, anyway, white allows bishop takes. I think he would take back with his queen, but he could take back even with the pawn. Lines up. White must consider how dangerous is it to sacrifice this bishop for these two pawns. It actually doesn't look too dangerous, as white has a couple of knights close to each other over here. Knight g3, rook moves. Okay, that's a curious move. I'm not sure why black did that. Now knight g5, moving this black knight to here, would attack white's queen. It also gets out of the way of this f-pawn. Black might want to put his rook on the f-file and start moving some pawns up. He's got to be careful of white's bishop, though, especially this light-colored one. Maybe he can keep it blockaded. And what is this, a draw? No, white won this. Knight a5. Bishop c2. Takes, a4. Takes. Bishop to b2. The knight goes back. Now the bishop aims at the black king, only one pawn in the way. Rook comes up, guarding the knight from the white queen. He threatens b5. Black just trades. White does not allow black to have central passed pawns. Okay, he doubles. And now g4. White might be moving his king to the h-file soon. He may want to put it on a white square. And he does, because black has a dark squared bishop. He wants to relocate it. That sort of ensures that the knight stays there, or white will trade off some of his pieces. The exact purpose of that move I'm not sure of, because after rook h1, the black queen is not trapped. He just takes that, so he attacks the queen. Black attacks white's queen, but white undoes that. Now it's still black to move, so finally he moves. And that move is apparently a mistake. So G6, common theme, attacking E6 and F7, common theme for black in the Rui. No check this way. But yeah, why would he not go here? Of course he does. Rook E5. Oops, wrong place. Where should he have gone? He should have traded queens. So, after the rook moves, black decides that white has won. Well, bishop b4 looks pretty good. It says take the queen, and after it takes back, play it, take at h6. With a rook. Oh, with the rook. So the winning line here would be to take, and now go rook takes. Idea being that if pawn takes, bishop takes, king here is only legal move, then bishop g5 check is going to win more stuff still. King can't even stay too close. And then takes, and it's a rook and two bishops against a rook and bishop and knight, and white has a lot more pawns and both bishops. So this is resignable for black. Next game, again the same start, and he plays bishop c4, and black this time plays the two knights defense. So white plays d3, plays bishop c5, and white transposes right back into this line of the Giucco Pianissimo. d5 is okay, black has two defenders. White surrenders the center, but he now has clear access to black's e5 pawn, preventing bishop g4. And black provides a second defender on f7. White threatens checkmate. Black's got to stop that. But with 3 against 2 here, that's a check. Now the computer calls king h7 a question mark, but what else is he going to do? Take with his rook and lose the exchange? I guess he has to. Like this, and then like this. But that's not what he did. He went here. I understand why, because white could have moved the knight and given check from the bishop if the king went to the alternative at g8. Now sacrifice time. Check. No, queen takes queen. And this is where black resigned. So, take a look at these other games here. You may want to take a picture because these games are available on chessgames.com. Michael Adams versus Robert Kula, Rashida Corbin versus Kanita Tawit. Those are some relatively short games because there was a big mistake in there. The Michael Adams game versus this other guy, this little draw here. We'll take a quick look at it. That really is a second-rate move, this castles here. I think there was something special going on with this guy, Robert Kula. Looks like we're coming up to one of our favorite positions here. And that's the first time we saw the bishops trade in that manner. There's a knight and a bishop in addition on f2, so if white were to move this knight here, he's got a problem at f2. So that explains his next move. c4, g6, 25 knight e4, king g7, 26 b4, knight f5, 27 rook d3, queen e7. And this is kind of representative of the way this should go when both players play well. White is doing almost everything he can to get all these pawns off the board. Not sure why. White's got the extra pawn, and this guy ends up getting a draw against a grandmaster here. Because his rook is more active. Yeah. Okay. Well, that should give you a way to get started. Again, I'm going to very much recommend that if you're going to plan to start playing the Giucco Pianissimo, have a good look at the Evans Gambit. Have a good look at some of the other tricky gambits that young kids get caught in. And then on the positional side, have a good look at the Ruy Lopez also, as if you were going to play it as white. And then finally, look at a lot of games in the Giucco Pianissimo where the opening was in fact chosen. And I think you'll find it's a relatively safe opening for black, but it's also relatively safe for white. So it's a good position to beat a lower rated player in. I don't think it's a real good position or opening to try to beat a higher rated player with. I think your best chance against the higher rated player is to play something very sharp like Evans Gambit. So, thanks for listening.